Hello everybody, it's jrobi. Today we're going to be taking a look at the elephant trap, and the elephant trap is a line that you can get into in the Queen's Gambit declined lines. And it caught my eye because online you'll probably, well, if you play online chess, you'll probably have seen the Queen's Gambit played a lot. It's one of the top played openings from white. I found the elephant trap interesting because from what I was able to find out, it has a lot of success at the amateur level. So if your opponents aren't comfortable with it or even know about it in your online blitz games, you'll probably have a lot of success with it. So we're going to get into it here. We'll just put all the pieces back at the beginning, and we'll talk a little bit about the Queen's Gambit declined. So it starts off with the Queen's pawn opening up to d4, and now Black's going to play pawn to d5, at which point White's going to offer up the Gambit pawn now. But in this position, we're going to decline it. So we're going to play pawn to e6. Now from here, a common move for White is to play knight out to c3, and Black is going to play knight out to f6. And the most logical looking move for White in this position is to bring the bishop to g5 because it's pinning that knight down to the queen. And now we're going to get into a move that starts it all off for us, and it's knight to d7. Now, the knight to d7 is actually part of a book line for a defense called the Cambridge Spring defense, and it can also get into the lines of the Orthodox defense. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of those pretty soon here, but I want to get to the trapping line first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the positions of those two other defenses. So if you take a close look at the position as it currently stands, you might notice something about the d5 square. And that is if White were to initiate an attack, on the surface it looks like it comes a pawn ahead. And we're going to play through why that looks to be the case. So White's going to come in now and initiate an attack by taking on d5. Black's going to recapture with the pawn, and White is going to swing the knight down now to d5, comfortable in the fact that the knight is pinned to the queen. But unfortunately for White, Black can actually go ahead and take the knight on d5. Now, you might be thinking, well, this just opens up access for the bishop to come and take the queen. And it does. And White would play bishop captures queen on d8. But from here now, Black has a very strong move, and it's very simple. And it's just bishop to b4. And you'll notice that bishop to b4 puts the king into check, and the only way that that check can be blocked is if the queen now moves to d2, at which point Black can come in, capture the queen with check, White recaptures the bishop, and now Black recaptures the bishop. And from this position, Black is technically 2 points of material ahead, but the engines give it a full piece advantage from this position. And that's the elephant trap line. And it's such a subtle line, and if your opponent isn't aware of it and doesn't play into the other defense lines, they're going to be caught unaware, and the consequences are going to be very high. So let's go back to the beginning. We'll just take one more quick look at the elephant trap line itself, and then we'll take a look at those other defenses I mentioned before. So after the queen's pawn opening from White, Black plays pawn to d5. White's going to offer up the Gambit pawn. Black's going to decline. So we're into the Queen's Gambit declined lines. From here, White's going to play knight to c3. Black's going to play knight to f6. And White's going to bring that bishop, pinning that knight down. And from here now we get into knight to d7. And now the action is going to revolve around the d5 square. So now once again, White from this position could see, due to the pin on the knight, that they might be able to win a pawn here. But if they don't go a few moves farther in that line to see the trap, then it's going to be too late. So if White initiates the action and takes the pawn, Black can capture. White captures the pawn, thinking that this pin is legitimate and solid. But from here, White's in for a big surprise when Black captures that knight. White takes queen. Black simply plays bishop to b4 check, and from here Black gets 2 points material advantage. So it's definitely a very smooth, dangerous trapping line that if your opponent's not aware of, he or she is going to be in for some big trouble. So let's take a look at those other lines that I mentioned after knight moves to d7. And we're going to take a look at a couple of different options here, because if your opponent is aware of the elephant trap, they're not going to try to play for central control by initiating an attack on d5. Instead, your opponent is most likely going to play knight to f3. And this leads into the openings that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And the first we're going to look at is a Cambridge Springs defense from Black. So after knight plays to f3, Black can simply play pawn to c6. White will most likely reply pawn to e3, and black can now play queen to a5. And in this position, the engine scores this as complete equal for both sides. So this is a safe line to go down. So once again, after knight to d7, if white plays knight to f3, you're completely equal and safe to play pawn to c6. White will play pawn to e3, at which point you can play queen to a5, and in this position you're equal. Now, before I had made passing reference to the orthodox defense lines, and the orthodox defense lines is instead of playing, after white plays knight to f3, instead of playing pawn to c6, black can play bishop up to e7. But unfortunately for black, this gives white a very slight positional advantage. Now, according to the engines, it's only a tenth of a material point, but you don't want to give any slight advantage if you don't have to, because over time your opponent can turn those slight advantages to a very large crushing advantage. So what I would recommend, at least from the sources that I've looked at, don't even bother with the orthodox line. Simply stick with the Cambridge Springs defense, which is pawn to c6, and you'll be fine. So definitely enjoyed going over this trap, and I hope you found it useful. And I know that from my experience, I've seen the Queen's Gambit offered up a lot of times on online play. And before I really didn't know about the elephant trap, I definitely have had opportunities to use it, and I do look forward to trying it out in my blitz matches, and hopefully you guys will find it useful for yours. So take care, hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.